Hi, welcome to the Maricopa Association of Governments. If you would like to speak at today's meeting, you can sign up for public comment using one of the tablets provided. 3 opportunities are provided for public comment at today's meeting, including the call to the audience, during the consent agenda, and for any action items to be heard. 15 minutes will be provided for call to the audience agenda item, unless the chair requests an exemption to this limit. Call to the audience is for comment on items that are not on the agenda that fall under the jurisdiction of MAG, or on items that are on the agenda for discussion or information, but not for action. Those wishing to comment on action items will be provided the opportunity at the time that the item is heard. Once you approach the podium, you will have up to 3 minutes to complete your comments. A timer is provided to assist you. If you parked in the garage, a validation stamp is available on the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to today's meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing-assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Thank you again for joining us today and for your interest in our region.
Good morning, members of the Transportation Review Committee. This meeting is now called to order at 10:03 a.m. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair Wilcox. I will go down the list alphabetically by organization, and please indicate if you are present. Shane Kiso, Apache Junction.
Present.
Thank you. Audra Merrick, ADOT. Raj Thowdam, Avondale. John Willett, Buckeye.
Present.
Thank you. CJ DiMaggio, Carefree.
Present.
Thank you. Hal Marin, Cave Creek. Vice Chair Crampton, Chandler.
Here.
Thank you. Jorge Gastelum, El Mirage.
Present.
Thank you. Andy Smith, Florence.
Present.
Thanks. David Janover, Fountain Hills. Nathan Williams as proxy for Jason Hafner, Gilbert.
Present.
Thank you. Parab Adabala, Glendale.
Present.
Thank you. Hugh Bagok as proxy for Steve Cinto, Goodyear.
Present.
Thank you. Cassandra Gomez, Guadalupe.
Present.
Thank you. Keith Jernaski, Litchfield Park.
Present.
Thank you. Keith Brown, Maricopa. Chair Wilcox.
Present.
Thank you. Eric Darian, Mesa. Shar Johnson, Paradise Valley.
Present.
Thank you. Leticia Vargas as proxy for Brianna Velez, Phoenix.
Present.
Thank you. Christopher Wanamaker, Pinal County. Mohammed Yusuf, Queen Creek. Nathan Domi, Scottsdale. Eric Boyles, Surprise.
There's
Now I'm here.
Thank
night
you.
or day, but the one from Canyon Ridge has been going on for a few years, and they did weekend.
Shelley Seiler, Tempe.
Present.
Thank you. Chris Hamilton, Tolleson.
Present.
Thank you. Trevor Collin, Valley Metro.
Here.
Herschel Workman, Wickenburg. Grant Anderson, Youngtown.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you. Our next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. I have received no requests to speak for the call to the audience. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with the committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. Staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Thank you, Chair Wilcox. We have received no written comments for the call to the audience.
Thank you. We'll move to item number 3, the MAG staff report. This item is on the agenda for information and will be presented by Patrick Stone, MAG Deputy Transportation Director of Programming.
Thank you, Chair Wilcox, members of the Transportation Review Committee. Pleasure to be here today to present the staff report. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, we mentioned this back in the December meeting, but USDOT does have the BUILD grant notice of funding out for consideration. Applications are due just over a month on February 24th, just $1.5 billion available. We'll note when we first mentioned this back in December, the NOFO had not been posted, which is the notice of funding opportunity. That now is available out on the USDOT website. And we've provided the hyperlink if you want to learn more information. As always, if member agencies are interested in a letter of support from MAG, please contact myself or Wendy Miller. Next slide. As we met early in the month of December, we actually have 2 months of data to report for both the Highway User Revenue Fund, or HERF, and also the Regional Area Road Fund, RARF. Here we're looking at the HERF collections for the month of November, slightly below year over year, and the forecast. Next slide. As we transition to December, the month over month a little closer, however, quite a bit below forecast for the month of December. Next slide. And as we see the trend overall kind of reflecting those 2 months of collection, November, the year-to-date forecast was just slightly over the forecast. However, as we moved into December, they've now dropped to 0.6 below the forecast. However, still within the department's variance levels. Next slide, please. Moving on to RARF, doing well still in RARF, 1.3% higher than 2020 or 2024. And 0.4% above forecast. Next slide. Transitioning November, very strong month, 3.5% higher than the prior year and 3.1% above forecast. Next slide, please. And so as we look at year to date to forecast, trending still in the positive direction, 0.8% month of October, and then 1.3% for November. And with that, Chair Wilcox, that concludes my remarks. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. Move to item 4, informational items. Item 4 is for informational items only. There are no information items on today's agenda. We'll proceed to agenda item 5, approval of the consent agenda. Items 5A and 5B. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Hearing none, prior to approval of the consent agenda, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment. I have received no requests for this item. Staff, have we received any online written comments for this item?
Thank you, Chair Wilcox. We have received no online written comments for the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve agenda items 5A and 5B?
Chair. Shane Kiso, City of Apache Junction. I move to approve the December 11th, 2025 meeting minutes as printed.
Thank you, Shane. Can I have a second to the motion?
City of Litchfield Park, second.
Thank you. We will have those participating in the meeting online take part in a voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. We need to see the faces of everyone to participate in the voice vote. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will roll call vote. Staff will only call on those virtual participants who did not turn on their cameras. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote so that staff can count the people's names whose cameras are not on. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their cameras?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everyone had their cameras on and the motion passes.
Great, thank you. So we'll move to item number 6, the Freeway Lifecycle Program Minor Improvement Funding Request, Loop 303 and Waddell Road Interchange, northbound exit ramp widening. This item is on the agenda for action and will be presented by Velvet Matthew, MAG Freeway Engineering Manager.
Good morning, Chair Wilcox and members of the Transportation Review Committee. I'm going to say it again. I'm here to present the Freeway Lifecycle Program Minor Improvement Funding Request for the Loop 303 and Waddell Road Interchange northbound exit ramp widening. So first, I'd like to start with an overview of minor improvements. The Freeway Lifecycle Program is the management tool for the implementation of freeway and highway projects that are funded through Proposition 400 and Proposition 479. Back in May and June of last year, MAG Regional Council approved the fiscal year 26 Prop 400 and Prop 479 FLCPs. Each of them allotted $5 million for minor improvement funding for fiscal year 2026. Combined, that means there is $10 million available for minor improvement projects for fiscal year 2026. This agenda item represents a request for $3.8 million of minor improvement funding for fiscal year 2026. So what is a minor improvement project? It is a smaller cost project with a very specific improvement that can have a major impact. Typically, no new right-of-way is needed and no utility impacts are anticipated as well. This means that the project can be implemented relatively quickly. So now I want to talk a little more details about the project itself. The Loop 303 is located in the Northwest Valley. It connects Interstate 10 to the west, US 60 Grand Avenue, and Interstate 17 to the north. And Loop 303 is experiencing an increase in traffic demand, which aligns with the increase of the development being seen along the corridor. The Loop 303 and Waddell Road interchange is located in the heart of the Prasada neighborhood. Along Waddell Road, there has been significant increase in commercial and residential developments. As you can see here on the map, the commercial developments surround the interchange. And those developments range from restaurants to clothing stores to home goods stores, car dealerships, a Walmart, and on top of that, a Costco. So it's not surprising that this interchange is experiencing congestion and severe queuing. So traffic analysis was performed, and as part of that, traffic counts were taken. They resulted in identifying that, surprisingly, the peak hours are from Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. and Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. The peak volumes during those hours were relatively the same no matter the day. Approximately over 1,000 vehicles are exiting, both in the northbound and southbound direction. 1,500 vehicles are heading eastbound, and about 1,300 vehicles are heading westbound. Next, we took a look at the connected vehicle data that we have available to us, and we were able to validate what the public is experiencing today. With all the demand on this interchange, the queue lanes are becoming extensive, and in particular, the northbound exit ramp has the worst queuing. Yep, can you proceed the slide, Tyler? Okay. So now looking into the queue data itself. On the map here are orange dots that represent a queue point. This is a count for 24 hours. A queue point is defined where a vehicle speed drops below 5 miles per hour. As you can see, the worst queuing again is on the northbound exit ramp. Now, typically the average length of that queue is about 1/3 of a mile long, but it can reach up to 1/2 mile in length. Once it extends to that kind of length, the impacts to the main line are severe. Here are a series of pictures that show the progression of the queuing. First, the queuing will fill up the entire length of the ramp, starting here on the left. In the middle, you will now see that the queue spills over into the main line and impacts all northbound directions of the main line. Eventually, as the traffic demand decreases, you'll see the impact to the main line starts to dissipate. Now, historically in the queue data, it was determined that the worst days for queuing are, again, Friday and Saturday. That coincides with our traffic count data. And the worst hours for queuing are Friday at noon, Friday from 5 to 6 p.m., and Saturday at noon as well. Delving a little further into the data on the ramp, we were able to determine that on the northbound exit ramp, the right turn is the most dominant movement. So looking at the existing configuration of the ramp today, northbound exit ramp is a single lane exit ramp that transitions into 2 left turn lanes and a single right turn lane. The traffic analysis has recommended that the ramp be widened to a 2-lane exit ramp that would transition into 2 left turn lanes and 2 right turn lanes. If this request is ultimately approved, design could start as early as this spring and could anticipate advertisement for construction in early 2027. And with that, that leads me to the action being requested today, which is to recommend approval to program $3.8 million from the Freeway Lifecycle Program minor improvements allocation to the Loop 303 and Waddell Road interchange, northbound exit ramp widening. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Velvet. Do any members have any questions or comments of Velvet on this agenda item? Prior to voting, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment. I have received no requests for this agenda item. Staff, have we received any online written comments for this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair. We have received no online written comments for this agenda item.
Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend approval to program $3.8 million from the Freeway Lifecycle Program minor improvements allocation to the Loop 303 and Waddell Road interchange northbound exit ramp widening?
I move. Eric Boyles, City of Surprise.
Thank you, Eric. Can I have a second?
Anderson, I second.
I'm sorry, who is that?
Anderson, Youngtown.
Thank you, Grant. We'll have those participating in the meeting online take part in the voice vote by turning on their cameras and unmuting their audio. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Members, please leave your cameras on. Staff, can you take a roll call vote of the members participating virtually who did not turn on their cameras?
Vice Chair Crampton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 7, potential expansion of the wrong-way driver detection system. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Kirsten Houston, MEG Principal Planner.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee, and I'm going to talk about the potential expansion of the wrong-way driver detection system. This may be deja vu for some of you because I've did it a few times. I've seen some of your names, so apologies. I'm going to talk about ADOT's wrong-way vehicle detection program. I'm going to talk about the regional coverage of the detection, the gaps in the coverage, and the opportunities for expansion. So ADOT came to the committee cycles back in April this past spring. There was a lot of interest in the wrong-way detection system and expanding it throughout the region's freeways. ADOT talked to us about their pilot project, which was the first project with the system. It was installed on the I-17 from the 10 to 101 in 2017. They also talked to us about the components in that system, the software used in the system, and the incursion data they're collecting. So this is a drawing of the pilot. This is where you can see where the components were installed. They installed thermal sensors and video cameras. The light red and light gray is kind of those detection areas. And so what I'm going to show you is this vehicle driving on the roadway, entering the freeway from the exit ramp, becoming a wrong way driver. So what happens is these sensors detect the vehicle and will trigger the wrong way sign to light up. 9 times out of 10, this vehicle will self-correct and not enter the freeway. But if it does enter the freeway, the camera will feed back to the traffic operations center, where a dispatcher can trigger the red light ramp meters to light up, deterring vehicles from entering the freeway, and will also trigger the dynamic message sign to post an alerts message, again, alerting drivers of a wrong way driver. So ADOT also talked to us about the software that they have for the system. It was a custom-built decision support software. It feeds back information from the cameras to the traffic operations center. And this is where a dispatcher can, again, activate the red light ramp meters, the dynamic message signs, and DPS if they need to. So ADOT also talked about the incursion data they're collecting. So it's the number of incursions, mainline entries, corrections that are occurring, and they're tracking all that data on in their system. This is the data they're collecting, and you see gaps, and that's because there's areas that don't have that detection. So we don't know if there's incidents occurring or not. So ADOT's determined that the 2 optimal areas of placement are at the interchanges. So components are placed at the exit ramps, and then also on the main line where components are placed on the dynamic message sign structure. So here's a photograph or a picture diagram of where the components are placed on a typical interchange. So there are 2 thermal sensors, a video camera, and 2 LED wrong way signs placed at the interchange, along with conduit poles, software, and the installation itself. It's estimated that an interchange installment costs about $500,000. On the main line, components are placed on the dynamic message sign structure. That is where 2 thermal cameras are placed, along with the conduit, the software, and the installation itself. And the cost of a mainline installation is $150,000. So due to that interest of the system, we wanted to know what ADOT has already installed. What do we have on our freeways? So this is the pilot project, that first project that they did. Since then, ADOT has done installation through various segments of the Valley's freeways. These areas, keep in mind, some of these only have partial detection. So there is some detection in all these areas, but that's not full coverage everywhere. In the future, with Prop 479 and all the freeway projects that will occur for the next 20 years, we will either add wrong way detection where we don't already have it, upgrade what's out there, and with the goal of covering as much as possible. So we know what's out there now from the information ADOT provided. We know what we're going to have with the funding in the next 20 years, but we want to know what we're missing. So we're calling those gaps in the system. So these are the gaps, and the blue is where there's no detection on the main line. The orange is where there's no detection at the interchanges, and the blue and orange is where there's no detection on either. Now this is those same areas in a kind of a tabular format with the number of interchanges missing and the mainline locations missing. We did work with ADOT to prioritize. So this is listed in their prioritized, what they want to address first. And that's due to incursion incidents that they've documented, crash data, and other safety issues. So we're looking at ways at MEG to fund these gaps. We looked at projects that we can include these gaps in that are going to construction soon. One project, sorry, I'm not touching it. One project is the I-10. So we're widening I-10 from the 85 to Citrus. Wrong way detection will be included in that project. With interest of TPC, we want to come back with a funding scenario to fund the rest of the gaps. And then we're always looking for other opportunities for funding, including discretionary grants. So I just want to point you to our program, to the RSTIP. There's table for our regional programs. One item in that table is for ITS. And we have about $30 million per year in the ITS funding item. Some of that is for the freeways, and wrong-way detection would be included in that funding item. So that's just an option, a funding source. So taking you back to the gaps, so you can see those again, we were looking for transportation policy guidance on potentially bringing a funding scenario back. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kristen. Do any members have any questions or comments with Kristen on this agenda item?
Chair, this is Nathan with Town of Gilbert. I had a couple of questions, I think. Could you tell us how many wrong-way drivers you're seeing annually on the freeway? Do we have any idea of that? Whether it's, through this, where there's detection now, or just in general, does ADOT have that number?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We do have that information. I don't have it on the top of my head, but ADOT does collect that data.
And it would include like the entire freeway system, or just where there's wrong-way detection devices?
Yeah, that's where we're limited right now, because they can only detect what the detection system sees. And then, of course, unless someone calls something in, but that's where the gaps, we don't have all that information.
Right. And do you feel that like full implementation, like we're talking about here, would kind of help to prevent most of those? Or what is like a percentage of, I guess it's 9 out of 10, maybe it'd be a 90% rate, or what kind of percentage would you put on that?
I don't have that answer, but I can find out.
Okay.
Do any other members have any questions or comments for Kristen? If not, we'll move to item number 8, federal reauthorization update. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Patrick Stone, MAG Deputy Transportation Director of Programming.
Thank you, Chair Wilcox, members of the Transportation Review Committee. Pleasure to be here today to present this item. So this is, as the chair noted, an update on federal reauthorization. So the presentation today really got 4 components to my presentation, kind of a 101 high-level overview of what reauthorization is, then going to dive into surface transportation funding over the last period of years, talk about the impacts to funding in the region, and then where do we go from here in some next steps. And so reauthorization 101, you see the question mark, and really it's kind of helping folks, what is it? And really that first bullet point illuminates what it is. It sets the policies, priorities, and funding levels for surface transportation for the next few years. Does provide financial certainty to states as you hear and talk about other projects coming up. You need that financial certainty to deliver those large scale capital investments. The reason they call it reauthorization is they never start new. They always build off of the prior surface transportation bill, so they're reauthorizing what they had done previously. And typically, we usually see these bills in a 5 to 6 year length. Current transportation bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, was signed back in November of 2021. The reason why we're talking about reauthorization today is it expires later this year in September. One thing to note, over the last 25 years, they have never gotten reauthorization done in time. They've always had to extend the current bill. We have heard they fully intend to get it done this year. We'll see. When we think about transportation funding in the reauthorization, the source of funding is the Highway Trust Fund, or the HTF. Pretty much is made up of federal gas and related excise taxes. And a key bullet point, and you'll see me come back to this later in the presentation, the trust fund is not sustainable as it exists today. And in fact, since 2008, almost $280 billion have been transferred to the general fund to keep transportation funding solvent. As we talk about reauthorization, this really involves Congress and congressional action. The Senate and the House both draft their own legislative priorities. The White House may also identify what they consider key components of the bill. I wanted to take a moment to talk about really what we see when we talk about the 2 chambers. In the House, there's actually 4 committees that have a role in transportation funding. I highlighted really 2. One being the environmental and public, oh, excuse me, that's the Senate one. Did it go past? No. Well, all right. Anyhow, Senate, 4 committees, key being the Environmental and Public Works Committee, which does the highway section, as well as the Finance Committee that figures out how to pay for the bill. There we go. And then in the House, there's 3 committees. The big one, and we'll talk about this later, Transportation and Infrastructure, or the T&I Committee, and then the Ways and Means Committee, which has to figure out how they're going to pay for the bill. All right. So surface transportation bills, there we go. When we think about surface transportation funding, there's really kind of a demarcation. Surface transportation funding actually has existed for 110 years. The first transportation bill was done in 1916, the Federal Aid Road Act. That really set what transportation funding is. The other keynote was 5 years later, 1921, the Federal Highway Act. That really set the concept of transportation funding for highways. Fast forward a few decades, we get into the 50s, post-World War II. Emphasis was really on building out the interstate system and connecting the country. Here you see a lot of data. This essentially starting in 1991 with what is known as ICE-T, and I'll get into the acronyms later. That's what we consider the beginning of modern transportation funding. That was the first bill that they've considered modern. You move through numerous iterations of bills through the early 2000s. We get into 2021 where we saw IIJA bill get done and ultimately talk about this expiring at the near the end of this year in September. So as I said, ICE-T from 1991, it's considered the first of the modern transportation bills. It was a 6-year bill, $155 billion. And really why they consider this one of those transformative bills, it shifted away from the interstate system to the national highway system. So moving off of just building out the interstates, established the linkage of transportation funding to air quality. And then you'll see this happen time and time again throughout surface transportation bills. This was one where they added a lot of programs. So they added 4 new formula programs. Ones that are very important to the region and MAG, the Surface Transportation Program, or STP, and then Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, which was the establishment of tying the air quality to funding. One thing to note, and this is a critical component under the funding section, so you will see this time and time again, I'll come back to it when we get into more current bills, they did not update the formulas in this bill. They said, whatever we used from the prior bill, good enough, we're gonna carry them forward into the new bill. States like Arizona, this has a magnified impact because we are a growing state, consistently expanding our population, expanding our network. And so when you use the old factors, you penalize states that may be seeing some tremendous growth. Move on into 1998. They do love these names. This was the Transportation Equity Act for the 21st Century, or T21. Briefly go over this one. It added the Transportation Enhancement Program. This ultimately eventually morphed in the 2010s into becoming Transportation Alternatives. This one then pivoted off the prior bill. They updated the formulas this time. And so again, they reestablished what the baselines were to allocate funding to states. And an interesting side note, up to this point, they could divert Highway Trust Fund revenues to solve the national deficit. This is the bill that prohibited that from happening. And so now the Highway Trust Fund is kind of resilient to that. Moving to the 2000s, this is a very long name, the Safe, Accountable, Flexible, and Efficient Transportation Equity Act of 2005, a legacy for users, or Safety-Lu. Always like to throw out the note, the LU is actually because the person who wrote the bill, that was their spouse's name, and they wanted to get an acknowledgement of their partner into the bill. Didn't know they did that. 5 years, $240 billion. This one kind of is, there we go. Again, added new formula programs. This one was kind of interesting because it added 2 safety-focused programs. We have the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP. That came about in Safety-Lu, as well as Safe Routes to School. The bill started in 2005, got partially through the bill, and then in 2008, 2009, it's when they had to do the first Highway Trust Fund infusion. The trust fund was no longer able to fund all of the transportation funding needs that were identified. Also, unfortunately, this was the last bill to use updated formula factors. So you are looking at a bill that was done 2 decades ago. That's the last time they touched formulas to say, hey, we need to recalculate what states need and what states should get. Moving ahead to the 2010s, moving ahead for progress in the 21st century. This is MAP 21. Shortest bill, 2 years. Very small investment, probably considered the most transformative of the more recent surface transportation bills. And it really, there's that last bullet point is the key component of why it's so transformative. They introduced performance-based programming to this concept. So they tied funding into meeting performance targets. One of the odd ones, it reduced the number of core programs. So they actually consolidated and simplified the process, and then got rid of also a lot of discretionary grants. So you also see that push-pull in the grant program. On the funding side, as I noted, because this was the bill that carried on the data from Safety Lou. So while we say you see the effects in MAP 21, they really started in the prior legislation, but they used 2009 data. That's where they anchored the numbers the last year of Safety Lou before it was extended. What it did is it set Arizona's allocation at 1.85%. It has not changed since then. Even though we know our population has grown tremendously, our lane miles have grown, our vehicle miles traveled have grown, we're still stuck at 1.85%. Getting a little later into the decade, Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, the FAST Act, back to a the clicker just one more. There we go. Can we go back one? There we go. FAST Act. Back to a 5-year bill done in the 2010s. Added one new formula program. This is where freight came into the consideration of policy distributions. The other one we talk about, the Surface Transportation Program. MAG gets a direct sub-allocation of that based on population. One thing interesting is that percentage increased in the FAST Act from 50% to 55%, which meant more direct funding to the region. Again, continuing on the trust fund issues and needing infusions from the general fund. Current bill, IIJA, again, another 5 years. As you notice, this is a massive bill, over 550 billion, single largest transportation investment bill in the nation's history. Did add 2 new formula programs. And then it also changed how they considered funding. Up until this point, they always said, well, here's your formula programs, here's the funding associated with it. They actually, instead of just doing those general fund transfers, they said, we are going to specifically fund programs from the general fund in advance. So they're called advance appropriations. And so they actually identified in the future, the general fund is going to help pay for certain types of what we would have considered in the past formula programs. And then we saw kind of the pendulum swing back, again, a number of discretionary grant programs. So what does it matter? Funding in the region. So we've shown this slide before, the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan. This is kind of the funding matrix behind that. That box in the lower right corner, we talk about it often. So as you can see highlighted in magenta, these are the federal programs. These are the sources of federal funds that flow into the RSTIP. Almost 40% of the funding comes from those sources. So any changes at the federal level have a magnified impact to the region and the region's ability to deliver projects. So I kind of talked about this and I said I'd come back to it. So this is the Highway Trust Fund. And what you really see, and unfortunately the slide doesn't go quite far enough into the past, but prior to 2008, the trust fund was self-sufficient. The revenues collected covered the expenses they had. And what you then see is since 2012 or 2008, these infusions coming in, and you see those big spikes where they've had those cash infusions, but essentially it's not sustainable. And the trust fund as it is today would go insolvent in 2028. So as part of congressional action to do reauthorization, again, they have to solve the funding question. We talked about this before. When we talk about the concept of the Highway User Revenue Fund, we always talk about gas tax in the state and that gas tax in the state hasn't been increased since 1991. Well, the feds aren't much better. Gas tax has not been increased since 1993. And what you really see and what this graph shows, accounting for inflation, the purchasing power of the Highways Trust Fund has declined 73% over the 20 years from 1993, or excuse me, the 30 years from 93 to 2023. So it's both what we see at the state level is also being experienced at the federal level. So where do we go from here? Reauthorization timeline. Last year, Congress and USDOT did some listening sessions over the summer, started talking to folks about what they might see coming out of a new transportation bill. From MAG's perspective, a lot of the advocacy groups that we follow or participate with started identifying their key positions as well. Move forward to this spring. Bill introductions, I have highlighted and bolded the imminent. We expect to see bills. We keep hearing every week they have been trading bills within committees, and that we should see the first bill introductions happening where we'll get the first iteration of what we think transportation funding is going to look like. MAG will keep tracking these. As we see the bills, we'll start analyzing what potential impacts can be, understanding that the introduced bills oftentimes are not what the final bill looks like. Moving to the summer, the committees that I identified earlier will actually get their final sections completed, make them part of a larger transportation funding bill, which will then go to the floors in the respective chambers for passage. Again, at that point, we'll have a very good idea of what we think the bills look like, and we can start analyzing the impacts. In anticipation of this fall, if everything goes correct, the bills get reconciled, go to the president for signature, he signs, and then we come back to all of our respective committees and start talking about what we see the impacts being to the region. So want to end on 2 slides. These are just the issues that we're seeing. So at a national level, there's a local officials in transportation, or the LOT coalition, kind of composed of a lot of groups MAG participates with, including AMPO and NARC. And really what they've done is they've identified some policy principles. They do want to see more direct allocation of transportation funding for local control. They would love to see the Safe Streets for All program become a formula program. And they want to they kind of want to maintain what's out there. They don't want to see anything get changed. So you move to the other side. Here we go. And then you have the state perspective. So the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, or AASHTO, their ask has been, we really need to see stability. They're the ones delivering those large capital projects. So they do want to see some stability while accounting for inflation. We've seen a cost for projects going up. The one, and it's the second bullet point, which is kind of interesting. Under the current bill today, under IIJA, 76% of the funding is formula-based. 24% is through discretionary grants. They want to see the formula-based funding go up to 95%. That would be the highest it's been in years. So they really, they want to see the controls in the hands of the states and look at it that way. And then the other one I'll end with, the second to the last bullet point. They want to get rid of the tie out of transportation funding to meeting performance targets. With that, Chair Wilcox, members of the Transportation Review Committee, concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Patrick. A lot to digest there. A lot of
apologies in advance.
A lot of activity coming up in the future months. Do any members have any questions or comments of Patrick on this agenda item?
Chair Wilcox.
Yes, please go ahead.
Patrick, thank you for the excellent presentation. Just if you know, just for my curiosity's sake, do you have any insights as to why you mentioned a few times that the formula, it's been some time, a few transportation bills back, to where they didn't really look at the state growth or state population? And if the answer is why don't that would seem to a bunch of engineers probably that should be standard, but if the answer it's just politics, but is there any insights as to why that doesn't happen more regularly with each transportation bill?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wilcox, members of the TRC. Trevor, yeah, you kind of hit it right in the middle of that. It's politics. So the thing you have to understand with surface transportation funding, it's a zero-sum game. The pie is so big. For Arizona to get more, someone has to get less. We've done some high-level analysis where we've seen the biggest discrepancy, which is no surprise to anyone. The Intermountain West, which is ourselves, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, and then also the Sun Belt, have seen tremendous growth. To make that whole, really a lot of that would come from the Mideast and the Northeast. They would have to lose. They would have to give up some funding. And so to your point, it's very political. It's hard for a representative of one of those states who's all of a sudden going to have to say, well, we're going to get less money. And so what they've done is states haven't complained about it, because while Arizona's got 1.85% since, as identified since 2009, the pie kept getting larger. So every state grew. We got more funding. But if a bill ever maintains the status quo or unfortunately would go the other direction, it then becomes a conversation of like, I'm losing funding now. So yeah, no, great point though, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the membership? Hearing none, thank you, Patrick. We'll move to item number 9, request for future agenda items. Are there any requests from the membership for an item on a future agenda? Hearing none, the next agenda item is comments from the committee. Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? Hearing none, the next meeting of the Transportation Review Committee will be held on Thursday, February 26, 2026 at 10 o'clock a.m. With no further business, today's meeting is adjourned at 10:47 a.m.